I was afraid of commitment. Now I'm alone, at 79 Part 1. The empty chair. If I could go back, if someone would give me just one afternoon in the fall of 1974, I would walk through that door again. I would sit across from her. I would stay. But no one will give you that again. No one can give you a second chance to relive that moment that ruined everything. All you have left are memories, silence, and a kitchen where not even 2 coffee cups have stood for who knows how long. I'm 79 years old. My name is Walter Greer, and I live alone in a 3-bedroom house on Belmont Avenue in Dayton, Ohio. Most mornings, I sit at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and watch the light coming in through the window above the sink. The light hits the counter around 6:45. It moves slowly and golden across the linoleum and reaches the edge of the table by 8 o'clock. I know this because I've watched it every morning for the past 11 years, ever since I retired from the accounting firm where I worked at the same oak table for 36 years. There's no one to talk to, so I watch the light. The house is too big for one person. I know that. The realtor who sold it to me back in 1993 said it was perfect for a family. 3 bedrooms, a yard out back, a little porch with a wooden swing that creaks when the wind pushes it. I told her I wasn't married. She smiled and said, "Well, you will be?" She had this look on her face like it was only a matter of time, like life had a way of filling up rooms with people who loved you. I never was married. Not once. The 2nd bedroom has a desk in it now and a filing cabinet I haven't opened in 3 years. The 3rd bedroom has boxes, old tax returns, some books I keep meaning to donate to the library on Patterson Boulevard, a set of golf clubs with dust on the grips. I don't play golf anymore. My knees won't allow it. But I keep the clubs because getting rid of them would mean admitting something I'm not ready to say out loud. That nothing is coming. That no one is moving in. That the rooms will stay empty until someone else's name goes on the deed. I eat the same breakfast every morning. 2 eggs, scrambled soft. A piece of wheat toast with a scrape of butter, and that black coffee. I eat standing at the counter because sitting at the table alone feels worse somehow. When you sit at a table by yourself, there's always an empty chair across from you. It just stares at you. Standing, you can pretend you're just passing through. You're in a hurry. You've got somewhere to be. I don't have anywhere to be. On Tuesdays, I drive to the Kroger on Wilmington Avenue. On Thursdays, I go to the CVS pharmacy for my blood pressure medication and the little white pills they give me for my cholesterol. Every other Saturday, I get my hair cut at a place on Wayne Avenue run by a young woman named Lisa, who calls me sweetheart and asks how I'm doing. I always say the same thing, "Oh, I'm getting by." She nods like she understands, and maybe she does, and maybe she doesn't, but it doesn't matter because the haircut takes 12 minutes, and then I'm back in the car, driving home to a house that doesn't need me in it. I have a landline phone. It sits on the kitchen counter, plugged into the wall, beige plastic with a curly cord. And it rings maybe once a week. Usually it's someone trying to sell me something. Extended car warranties, Medicare supplement plans, solar panels for a roof I'll never replace. I answer every time. Not because I'm interested, because the sound of a voice, any voice, even one reading from a script, in some call center in who knows where, is better than the sound of that clock on the wall, ticking off seconds that don't belong to anyone. Sometimes I think about what it would sound like to hear my name said by someone who mean it. Not Mr. Greer from the pharmacist, not Sir from the kid who bags my groceries, but Walter, just Walter, the way someone says it when they've said it 1,000 times before and it still fits in their mouth like something warm. Margaret used to say it like that. There's a park 3 blocks from my house, Wiggerson Gardens, though most people just call it the park by the river. On warm days, I walk there and sit on a bench near the pond. Families come through. Young mothers pushing strollers with one hand and holding coffee with the other. Fathers throwing baseballs to their kids. Old couples walking side by side with their fingers laced together like they've been doing it so long. Their hands just know the shape. I watch them the way you'd watch a movie about a life you almost lived. Close enough to recognize, too far to touch. Last spring, a little girl, maybe 4 or 5, with red rain boots, even though the sky was clear, wandered over to my bench while her mother was on the phone. She looked at me with that wide-open stare children have, the kind that hasn't learned to look away yet, and she said, "Are you somebody's grandpa?" I said, "No, sweetheart, I'm not." She tilted her head like she was trying to figure out how that was possible, how a person could get this old and this gray without becoming somebody's grandpa. And then her mother called her back and she ran off, ponytail bouncing, boots slapping the path. I sat there for a long time after that. The thing about growing old alone in America is that nobody really notices. The neighbors wave when they see me checking the mail, but they don't knock on my door. The mailman leaves packages on the porch, usually things I ordered online because going to stores feels like too much effort some days. And I bring them inside and open them at the kitchen table. Last month I ordered a radio, one of those old-fashioned ones with a dial, because I wanted something in the house that made noise. Not television noise, not the kind that talks at you, just music, something human. I keep it on the counter next to the phone, and in the evenings, when the house gets so quiet, I can hear the refrigerator humming. I turn it on and let it play whatever it finds. Classic rock, country, sometimes a preacher on AM radio, going on about salvation and forgiveness. I don't mind the preacher. At least somebody's talking. The evenings are the hardest. That's when the house closes in. The light leaves and the shadows grow long across the living room floor. And if you're not careful, your mind starts to wander backward. Back to the places you left. The people you didn't hold on to. The doors you walked out of because staying felt like something that might kill you. Even though leaving is what did it in the end. I think about Margaret almost every evening. Not the way you think about someone you lost. Not with that clean, poetic sadness that looks good in movies. I think about her the way you think about a wound you gave yourself, a scar you earned by doing something stupid and irreversible and knowing, even as you did it, that you would regret it for the rest of your life. I was 26 when I met her. She was 23. It was September of 1972, in a diner on Brown Street that doesn't exist anymore. It's a laundromat now. But back then, it was a little place called Rosie's, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that played Patsy Cline and Elvis Presley, and sometimes, if the machine was feeling generous, Sam Cooke. She was sitting in a booth by the window, reading a paperback with the cover bent back, and the sunlight was catching the side of her face in a way that made me stop walking. I wasn't the kind of man who stopped walking for women. I was careful, controlled. I had rules about these things, about how close to get, how long to stay, how much to let someone in before the walls went up. My father had taught me that, not with words, with his life, with the way he drank himself quiet every night in the basement while my mother did the dishes alone upstairs, humming hymns that didn't make her happy. He was committed, he stayed, and staying ruined him. That's what I believed. But Margaret, something about her made the rules feel smaller. I sat down across from her, not at her table, just in the booth behind her, and I ordered a coffee I didn't want. She turned the page. I pretended to look at the menu. After a few minutes, she said without looking up, "If you're going to stare at the back of my head, you might as well come say hello." That was Margaret. Direct. Unafraid. She had this voice, low for a woman, warm, with a little bit of gravel in it, like she'd been laughing recently, and the echo was still in her throat. She had brown hair that she wore past her shoulders, and brown eyes that didn't look away from you when she talked. She wore a blue blouse with small white flowers on it, the kind of blouse women wore in the early 70s, and she had a silver ring on her right hand that she twisted when she was thinking. I said hello. She said, "What's your name?" I told her. She said, "Walter. That's a serious name. Are you a serious person?" I said I didn't know. She laughed. "That's a serious answer." We talked for 2 hours. I told her I worked at an accounting firm downtown, junior accountant, fresh out of college, still figuring out how to knot a tie properly. She told me she was a teacher, 3rd grade, at a school on the east side. She said she loved the kids, but the pay was a joke, and she was thinking about going back to school for a master's degree. She said she'd grown up on a farm outside of Springfield and moved to Dayton because she wanted something bigger, though she wasn't sure what that meant yet. I walked her to her car. It was a green Chevrolet Nova with a dent in the passenger door and a bumper sticker that said "Question Authority." She leaned against the door and looked at me and said, "Are you going to ask for my number, or do I have to do that too?" I asked for her number. She wrote it on the back of a napkin with a pen she pulled from her purse. Her handwriting was messy, the kind of handwriting that moves faster than the hand can keep up with, and the 7 looked like a 1. I kept that napkin in my wallet for 6 years. By the time I threw it away, the ink had faded to nothing, but I could still see the impression of the numbers in the paper, like a ghost of the thing. I called her 2 days later. We went to dinner, a little Italian place on 5th Street, where the candles were stuck in wine bottles, and the owner sang opera when he'd had too much of his own Chianti. Margaret ordered spaghetti and twirled it on her fork with the confidence of someone who didn't care about making a mess. I ordered chicken parmesan and cut it into small, precise pieces. She noticed. "You eat like an accountant," she said. I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "It means you're afraid of getting sauce on your shirt." She was right. I was afraid of getting sauce on my shirt. I was afraid of a lot of things. But for a while, for 2 years and 4 months, to be precise, because I counted, I let myself be less afraid. Margaret had that effect on people. She made the world feel less dangerous. She'd grab my hand in the middle of a sentence and pull me across the street to look at something. A flower growing through a crack in the sidewalk, a dog doing something funny, a sunset that was too orange to ignore. She was the kind of person who lived out loud, who took up space in a room without apologizing for it, who cried at movies and laughed in grocery stores and told strangers they had beautiful shoes. And I loved her. I loved her in a way I have never loved anything before or since. I loved her so much it felt like standing at the edge of something very high, looking down, knowing that if I jumped, I would either fly or fall, and there was no way to tell which one until I was already in the air. That was the problem. I couldn't jump. Part 2. The Choice. The turning point came in the fall of 1974. October, the leaves on the sycamores along the river had turned gold and rust, and the air had that crisp, clean smell that only comes in Ohio in October, like wood smoke and wet grass and the faint sweetness of apples from somewhere you can't see. Margaret and I had been together for just over 2 years. We'd settled into something comfortable, something that looked, from the outside, like the beginning of a life together. We spent weekends at her apartment, a small 1-bedroom on Xenia Avenue with a fire escape she'd lined with potted tomatoes, cooking dinner, listening to records, falling asleep on the couch during late-night movies. She kept a toothbrush for me in the bathroom cabinet. I kept a change of clothes in her closet. These were small things, but they were the kind of small things that meant something larger was forming, the way puddles join together before they become a stream. I knew what was coming. I could feel it in the way she looked at me sometimes. Not with expectation exactly, but with a question she was being patient about. She never pressured me. That wasn't Margaret's way. She didn't nag or drop hints or leave bridal magazines on the coffee table. But there was a weight to her silence sometimes, a fullness, like a room filling up with something invisible, and I knew that one day the question would come and I would have to answer it. It came on a Tuesday evening. I remember it was Tuesday because that was the day she always made soup, tomato soup from scratch, with basil from her fire escape garden, and bread she'd pick up from the bakery on her way home from school. We were sitting at her little kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg she'd propped up with a folded piece of cardboard, and the soup was steaming between us, and the radio was playing something soft. Carole King, maybe, or Joni Mitchell. And she said, without any preamble, without any warm-up, "Walter, what are we doing?" I put my spoon down. I knew what she meant, but I said, "What do you mean?" She looked at me, those brown eyes. "I mean us. What is this? Where is this going?" I didn't say anything for a long time. The soup was getting cold. The radio played on outside. I could hear a car horn and someone laughing on the street below. And the sound of their laughter felt cruel, like the world was going on without us, while we sat in that kitchen with this question between us like a wall. "I love you," I said. And I meant it. I meant it with every cell in my body. "I know you do," she said. "That's not what I asked." Margaret leaned back in her chair. She wasn't angry. That was the thing about her. She didn't get angry about the important things. She got quiet. She got still. And that stillness was worse than any argument because it meant she was thinking clearly. And when Margaret thought clearly, she saw everything. "I'm 25 years old," she said. "I want a life, Walter. I want a real life. I want a house with a kitchen bigger than this one. I want kids. I want to wake up next to someone and know they're going to be there tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. I want someone who's all the way in, not 1 foot in and 1 foot out, all the way." "I am all the way in," I said. "No, you're not." She said it simply, like she was reading a fact from a textbook. "You keep a bag packed by your front door. Did you know that? You literally keep a bag packed, like you might need to leave at any moment. You won't talk about the future. You won't say words like next year or someday. You change the subject every time I mention moving in together. You haven't introduced me to your mother. It's been 2 years, Walter. 2 years." Every word was true. I sat there and felt them land, one by one, like stones dropping into water. "I'm not asking for a ring," she said. "I'm not asking for a wedding date. I'm asking if you see a future with me. That's all. Do you see a future with us?" I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to say yes. I wanted to reach across that table and take her hands and say, "Yes, I see everything with you. I see mornings and evenings and holidays and arguments and making up and growing old and all of it, every last bit of it." I wanted to be the man who could say that. I had spent 2 years trying to become that man. But when I opened my mouth, the fear was there. The old, familiar fear. The one that had lived inside me since I was a boy, sitting at the top of the stairs, listening to my father's silence downstairs, understanding without being told that love was a trap, that commitment was a cage, that staying meant slowly losing yourself, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but routine and resentment and a bottle hidden in the back of the basement closet. "I don't know," I said. 2 years, 26 months of holding her hand and kissing her forehead and falling asleep to the sound of her breathing. 26 months of the happiest I had ever been, and the best I could do was, "I don't know." Margaret nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She just nodded, the way you nod when you've been expecting bad news and it finally arrives, and the relief of no longer waiting is almost worse than the news itself. "Okay," she said. "Margaret, no, it's okay." She stood up and took her bowl to the sink, even though she'd barely eaten. She ran the water and stood there with her back to me, and I could see her shoulders trembling slightly, and I knew she was crying, but she didn't want me to see. She had too much pride for that, too much grace. "I think you should go home tonight," she said. I stood up. I wanted to say something. The right thing, the thing that would fix this. The magic combination of words that would unlock whatever was broken inside me and let me be the person she needed. But there were no magic words. There was just me, standing in her kitchen with my coat on, looking at the back of the woman I loved more than my own life, knowing I was about to lose her because I couldn't say the one thing she needed to hear. "I'm sorry," I said. She turned off the water. "I know you are." I left. I walked down the stairs of her apartment building, and the air outside was cold and sharp, and the trees were bare, and the street lights were buzzing, and I got in my car and sat there for 20 minutes, with the engine off, staring at her window on the 2nd floor. The light was on. Then it wasn't. I told myself it wasn't over, that we'd talk again, that I'd figure it out given enough time, that I just needed a little more space, a little more room to breathe, and then I'd come back and say the things she needed to hear. But I didn't come back. Not that week. Not that month. I called her once 2 weeks later, and she answered, and her voice was calm and distant, and she said, "I think we need some time apart, Walter." And I said, "Okay," because that's what I always said. "Okay, sure. Whatever keeps the walls up, whatever keeps me from having to step off the edge." By December, it was over. She stopped calling. I stopped calling. The silence between us grew the way ice grows on a pond, slowly at first, thin enough to see through, and then thick and opaque, until you couldn't remember what the water looked like underneath. The last time I saw her was in March of 1975. I was walking out of the hardware store on Main Street, and she was walking in. We nearly collided in the doorway. She looked different, thinner, her hair shorter, something harder in her eyes that hadn't been there before. We stood there for a few seconds, and neither of us knew what to say. "How are you?" I asked. "Fine," she said. "I'm fine." "Good. That's good." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Take care of yourself, Walter." "You too." She walked past me into the store, and I walked out into the parking lot. And that was it. That was the last time. I was 27 years old, and I had just let the love of my life walk through a door I would never walk through again. I stood in that parking lot, and I knew right then, standing between a pickup truck and a station wagon with the March wind cutting through my jacket, that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I could feel it in my chest, this hollow, ringing emptiness, like someone had reached in and scooped out something vital and left me standing there with a hole where it used to be. But I didn't go after her, because going after her would mean admitting I was wrong. It would mean changing. It would mean jumping, and I was still too afraid to jump. Part 3. The cost. Here's what happened after Margaret. I became successful, not famous, not rich in the way that makes the newspapers, but comfortable, stable, respectable. All the things that look like happiness from the outside, but feel like furniture when you're living inside them. I threw myself into work, the way drowning men throw themselves at anything that floats. I showed up early. I stayed late. I volunteered for projects no one else wanted. I learned tax codes the way other men learned poetry. With devotion, with precision, with something that felt like love, but wasn't. By 1978, I was a senior accountant. By 1984, I was a partner. By 1990, my name was on the letterhead: Greer, Robinson, and Associates. I had an office on the 6th floor with a window that looked out over the river and a secretary named Dolores, who brought me coffee every morning at exactly 8:15, and a leather chair that cost more than my first car. People respected me. Clients shook my hand and said, "Walt, you're the best in the business." Colleagues invited me to dinner parties. I went sometimes. I put on a tie and make small talk about interest rates and real estate and whatever the president was doing, and I'd drive home afterward, feeling the same flat, nothing I felt every other night. I dated, I should say that. I wasn't a monk. Through my 30s and 40s, there were women, kind women, intelligent women, women who deserved better than what I gave them. There was Patricia, the nurse I met at a friend's barbecue in 1979. We lasted 8 months. She told me I was emotionally unavailable, and she was right, so I didn't argue. There was Denise, the real estate agent, in 1983. She was funny and loud, and she wore too much perfume, and she loved me in a way that should have been enough. We lasted 14 months. She wanted to move in together. I said I needed more time. She said, "Walter, there's never going to be enough time for you, is there?" She was right, too. There was Linda. In 1988, we lasted 2 years. The longest since Margaret. Linda was quiet and patient, and she understood something about me that the others hadn't. That the distance I kept wasn't about them. It was about me. She tried to wait me out. She thought if she was gentle enough, patient enough, steady enough, the walls would come down on their own like ice melting in spring. But walls don't melt. You have to take them down yourself, brick by brick, and I never picked up the hammer. She left on a Sunday morning in April. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with her suitcase already packed. She'd packed it the night before, while I was watching television in the living room, completely unaware. And she said, "I think there's someone you never got over, and I think you know who it is, and I think until you deal with that, you're never going to be able to love anyone else." I said, "That's not true." She said, "I'm not angry, Walter. I'm just tired." She left, and I sat on the bed for a long time, looking at the empty side where she'd been, and I thought about calling Margaret. Not to get her back, not to confess anything, just to hear her voice, just to know she was still out there somewhere, living the life I couldn't give her. I didn't call. The years went by. They do that. They go by faster than you think they will when you're young. And by the time you notice, it's too late to do anything but count them. My 30s became my 40s. My 40s became my 50s. I bought the house on Belmont Avenue. I filled it with things that didn't matter. furniture and appliances and a flat-screen television that was too big for the living room. I mowed the lawn every Saturday. I paid my taxes on time. I went to work and came home and went to work and came home, and the rhythm of it was like a pulse, steady and reliable and completely devoid of meaning. From the outside, I looked like a man who had it all figured out. I had the house, the career, the leather shoes, the retirement account. Was living the American dream, or at least the American version of it that involves owning things and going to brunch and never talking about the emptiness that sits in the center of your chest like a stone. But the nights were something else. The nights were when the house got quiet and the world got small and there was nothing between me and my own thoughts. That's when the regret would come, not all at once, not like a wave, but like a slow leak. Water seeping under a door, spreading across the floor, until everything was damp with it. I'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling and think about that kitchen on Xenia Avenue, the tomato soup, the wobbly table, the way she said my name. I'd replay the conversation over and over, trying different answers, seeing where each one led. What if I had said yes? What if I had said, I see everything with you? What if I had put my spoon down and walked around the table and held her face in my hands and said, I'm terrified, but I want this. I want you. I want all of it. Would she have stayed? Would we have married? Would there be children, grandchildren? Would the house on Belmont Avenue have been our house instead of my house? Would the second bedroom have a crib instead of a filing cabinet? Would the third bedroom have toys instead of boxes? I'll never know. That's the cost of the choice I made. Not knowing. Living with the permanent, irreversible not knowing. Somewhere in my late 40s, I heard through a mutual friend, Dave Morrison, who worked at the insurance agency on 3rd Street, that Margaret had married. A man named Thomas Ashby, a high school teacher who coached the baseball team. They had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. They lived in a house with a big front porch in Centerville, about 20 minutes south of Dayton. Dave said she seemed happy. He said it casually, the way you mentioned the weather, not realizing that every word was a knife. Happy. She seemed happy. I drove past their house once. Just once. It was a Saturday in June, and I told myself I was just taking a different route to the hardware store. But I knew exactly what I was doing. The house was yellow with white shutters, and there was a tire swing in the front yard, and a bicycle on the porch, and a garden along the side with flowers I couldn't name. There were sounds coming from the backyard. Children laughing. A dog barking. Someone calling out, Thomas, the burgers are ready. And it was the most ordinary, beautiful, devastating thing I had ever heard. I drove past and didn't stop. I went to the hardware store and bought a box of nails I didn't need, and drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for 30 minutes, and I cried. Not a lot, not the kind of crying that makes noise, just the quiet kind, where the tears come and you let them, and afterward your face feels hot, and your chest feels hollow, and you go inside and make dinner for one and turn on the television and pretend you're fine. The holidays were the worst. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Those long stretches of time that other people fill with family and noise and tradition. I filled them with work, mostly. I'd go to the office on Thanksgiving morning and organize files that didn't need organizing. I'd stay until the cleaning crew came, and they'd look at me with something between pity and confusion, and I'd say, just catching up on some things. And they'd nod and empty my trash can and move on. On Christmas Eve, I'd buy myself a steak and a bottle of wine and cook dinner in a kitchen that smelled like garlic and nothing else. No tree, no stockings, no wrapping paper on the floor, just me and a steak and the radio playing White Christmas while the snow came down outside my window and the whole neighborhood glowed with lights from houses full of people who had someone to give their love to. I kept telling myself I was fine, that I had chosen this, that freedom was what I wanted, and freedom was what I had, and wasn't that the whole point? I could eat what I wanted, sleep when I wanted, go where I wanted. No one told me what to do, no one needed anything from me. No one could trap me or disappoint me or make me into the thing I was afraid of becoming. But freedom, I learned, is a funny thing. It feels like wings when you're young, like you could go anywhere, be anyone, do anything. But as you get older, it starts to feel less like wings and more like an empty room. A big, quiet, empty room with no one in it but you. My mother died in 2001. She was 83. I drove to Springfield for the funeral and sat in the front pew of the little Baptist church where she'd gone every Sunday for 50 years, and the pastor said nice things about her, and her friends from the quilting circle cried into their handkerchiefs, and I sat there feeling like a stranger in my own mother's life. After the funeral, I went back to her house to sort through her things. In the top drawer of her dresser, underneath her Sunday gloves and a stack of prayer cards, I found a photograph. It was a picture of Margaret and me, taken at a 4th of July picnic in 1973. We were standing by a grill, and I had my arm around her waist, and she was laughing at something. I don't remember what. And I was looking at her with a face I barely recognized. Happy. I looked happy. Genuinely, stupidly, recklessly happy. The kind of happy you can only be when you haven't yet ruined the thing that makes you happy. My mother had kept that photograph for almost 30 years. She'd never mentioned it. She'd never said Margaret's name after we broke up. But she'd kept the picture, hidden away in her drawer like a prayer she was saving for later, and I understood then that she'd been waiting for me to come to my senses, waiting for me to go back, waiting for me to become the man in that photograph again. I put the picture in my wallet. I still have it. The edges are soft now, worn smooth from all the times I've taken it out and looked at it and put it back. Margaret's face has faded a little. My face has faded a little, but the feeling in that picture, the feeling of two people standing close together with the whole future ahead of them, that hasn't faded at all. There's a particular kind of cruelty in getting exactly what you asked for. I asked for independence, and I got it. I asked for space, and the universe gave me more space than any human being could ever fill. I walked through my 50s in a kind of fog. Functional, productive, respected, and completely hollow. I went to work. I came home. I made dinner. I watched television. I went to bed. I woke up and did it again. The routine was a machine, and I was the part that kept it running, and neither of us needed the other for any reason except habit. I turned 60 in 2007. Nobody threw me a party. I didn't expect one. I bought myself a steak at the butcher shop on Linden Avenue and a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon that cost more than it should have, and I grilled the steak in the backyard and ate it at the patio table while the fireflies came out and the neighbors' kids played in their sprinkler 2 yards over. I could hear them laughing. That helpless, breathless, pure laughter that children make when they're soaked and freezing and having the time of their lives. And I sat there with my expensive wine and my perfectly cooked steak, and I felt like a man watching a house burn down from across the street, knowing it used to be his. 60 years old. No wife, no children, no grandchildren, no one to call on my birthday, except the automated message from my dentist's office reminding me to schedule a cleaning. I started going to church around that time, not because I found God. I'm not sure I ever found God, but because it was a place where people gathered and sat together and shared something, even if I couldn't name what it was. I'd sit in the back pew at Trinity Lutheran on Sunday mornings and listen to the hymns and watch the families file in. Fathers in pressed shirts, mothers holding babies, teenagers sulking the way teenagers do. And I'd feel something like warmth, borrowed warmth, like standing near a fire that belongs to someone else. The pastor, a man named Reverend Hayes, noticed me after a few weeks and introduced himself. He was a big man with a soft voice and a handshake that could crush walnuts, and he said, "Welcome, Walter. Are you new to the area?" I said no. I'd lived here for years. He looked surprised, the way people always look surprised when they find out you've been nearby all along, and they never knew. "Well," he said, "we're glad you're here. I went to the coffee hour after the service a few times. People were kind. They asked me questions. What did I do for a living? Where did I grow up? Did I have family in the area?" And I answered them politely, and then stood by the coffee table with my styrofoam cup, watching the other congregants talk and laugh and complain about the weather and their jobs and their kids. And I felt the distance between their lives and mine, like a physical thing, a glass wall I could see through but not cross. After a while I stopped going, not because anyone was unkind, because the kindness made it worse. It reminded me of what I didn't have, the way looking at food when you're starving is worse than not looking at all. The years between 60 and 70 were the years I started to understand what I had done, not in a sudden dramatic way. No lightning bolt, no voice from the sky. but in the slow, grinding, accumulative way that understanding comes to old people. Like erosion, like water, wearing away stone. Each day took a little more of the lie I'd been telling myself. I'm fine, I chose this is what I wanted. And underneath the lie, there was the truth, and the truth was ugly and sharp and impossible to ignore. I had wasted my life, not in the conventional sense. I had a career, a house, a retirement fund, the respect of my peers. But I had wasted the only part of life that matters, the part where you love someone, and they love you back, and you build something together that is bigger than either of you alone. I had wasted that. I had thrown it away with both hands, and I had done it on purpose, and I had done it out of fear, and the fear, in the end, was about nothing. It was about a ghost, the ghost of my father, sitting in a basement that existed only in my memory, drinking bourbon that was 50 years old and long since evaporated. I was afraid of becoming my father. And in trying not to become him, I became something worse. My father, at least, had a family. He had a wife who hummed hymns in the kitchen. He had a son who sat at the top of the stairs and listened. He was unhappy, yes. He was trapped, yes. But he was not alone. At the end of his life, when the cancer came for him in 1989, my mother was there. She held his hand. She slept in a chair beside his bed. She told him she loved him, and she meant it. And he died knowing that someone in the world would miss him when he was gone. Who will miss me? Who will sit beside my bed? Who will hold my hand and tell me that I mattered? That my life meant something, that the world will be a little smaller without me in it? No one. Because I made sure of it. I built the walls so high and so thick that nothing could get in. And now nothing can get out, and I am trapped inside them, alone, exactly the way I was afraid of being, except that the trap isn't commitment. The trap is the absence of it. I retired in 2013. There was a party at the office, sheet cake from the grocery store, and cheap champagne in plastic cups, and a plaque with my name on it that said 36 years of dedicated service. My colleagues shook my hand and said things like, "Enjoy your retirement, Walt," and "You've earned it," and "What are you going to do with all that free time?" I smiled and said the things you're supposed to say. Travel, maybe, read more, take up a hobby, finally learn to play the piano. But I knew, even as I said them, that I wouldn't do any of those things. Travel is for people who have someone to travel with. You can see the Grand Canyon alone. But what's the point if there's no one to turn to and say, "Look at that"? Hobbies are for people who have something to distract themselves from. I didn't need distraction. I needed someone. And I had made sure, through 40 years of careful, deliberate avoidance, that there was no one. Dolores, my secretary, cried a little at the party. She'd worked for me for 18 years. She hugged me and said, "I'm going to miss you, Mr. Greer." I patted her back and said, "I'll miss you too, Dolores." And I meant it. She was probably the closest thing I had to a friend, and even she didn't know my middle name, or what I did on weekends, or that I'd been in love once, a long time ago, with a woman who ate tomato soup in a kitchen on Xenia Avenue. The last day at the office, I packed my things into a cardboard box. A desk lamp, a few books, a coffee mug with the company logo, the plaque. And I carried it to my car and put it in the trunk. I stood in the parking lot and looked up at the building where I'd spent 36 years of my life, and I thought, 36 years, 13,000 days. And what do I have to show for it? A box of things that will go in a closet and never come out again. The first morning of my retirement, I woke up at 6:15, the same time I'd woken up every morning for 36 years. And I lay in bed and listened to the silence, and it was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. There was no alarm to turn off, no schedule to keep, no office to drive to, no meetings, no deadlines, no Dolores with her coffee at 8:15. Just the silence, and the ceiling, and the slow realization that the next 40 years of routine had been replaced by nothing. A vast, formless nothing that stretched out ahead of me like a road with no destination. I lay there for an hour. Then I got up and made coffee and stood at the kitchen counter and watched the light come through the window. And I thought, this is it. This is the rest of my life. Part 4. The Realization. The phone stopped ringing sometime in my early 70s. Not all at once. It was gradual, the way everything is gradual when you're getting old. The way your knees start to ache, the way the stairs get steeper, the way the faces in the mirror get harder to recognize. One day you realize you haven't talked to anyone in a week. Then 2 weeks. Then you stop counting because counting makes it worse. I had colleagues once, people I ate lunch with, people who told me about their kids and their vacations and their remodeling projects. But retirement severed those ties the way scissors cut string, cleanly, completely, with nothing left to hold them together. Dave Morrison called a few times the first year, then once at Christmas, then not at all. Bill Kemper, who I'd worked with for 22 years, sent me a birthday card in 2014 and then nothing after that. I don't blame them. They had lives. They had wives and grandchildren and Sunday dinners and reasons to be busy. I was just the old guy from the office, the one who never married, the one who ate lunch alone at his desk, even when the rest of them went to the diner. The one who was always pleasant but never close. You can be pleasant your whole life and die without a single person who truly knows you. I'm proof of that. The loneliness came in like weather. Not a storm, a season, a long, gray, endless season that settled over everything and didn't lift. I started talking to myself around 2016. Not crazy talking, not arguments with voices in my head, just the normal, sad kind of talking that old people do when there's no one else to talk to. I'd narrate my day as I went through it. Okay, Walter, time for breakfast. Let's see, we've got eggs and bread and, oh, we're out of butter. Better add that to the list. I'd talk to the radio. I'd talk to the squirrels in the backyard. I'd say good morning to the cardinal that sat on the fence every day at 7:30, and when it flew away, I'd say, see you tomorrow, like we had an appointment. Once I spent 15 minutes having a conversation with a photograph of my mother on the mantle, asking her how her day was going, telling her about the weather, complaining about the price of eggs at Kroger. And then I stopped and looked at what I was doing, and I felt something I can only describe as horror. Pure, cold horror. Not at the talking. The talking was just a symptom. The horror was at the disease. The disease of choosing, deliberately and repeatedly, for 50 years, to be alone. This is what I had chosen. This is what my freedom looked like. An old man talking to a photograph in an empty house on a Tuesday afternoon. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with old age in America. It's not the kind you see in movies. Not dramatic, not romantic, not the kind that comes with a soundtrack and a redemption arc. It's the kind that settles into the furniture. It lives in the creak of the floorboards when you walk to the bathroom at 3 in the morning. It's the weight of a grocery cart with one person's worth of food in it. It's the way the checkout clerk says, "Have a nice day," and you realize that interaction, those 4 words from a stranger, is the only human contact you'll have for the next 24 hours. I started to notice things I'd never noticed before. The sound of my own breathing, the way my shoes sounded on the kitchen floor. Too loud, too present, like a clock counting down. The way food tastes when you eat it alone, which is to say, it barely tastes at all, because eating is a social act. And when you take the social part away, it's just fuel, just the mechanical process of keeping a body alive that nobody needs alive. I noticed the way holidays felt like punishments. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, those days that are designed for gathering, for family, for noise and warmth and belonging. Those days were the worst. The whole world turned inward toward its people, and I had no people, and the silence in my house on Christmas morning was the loudest silence of the year. I'd see the commercials on television, families around tables, grandparents hugging grandchildren, couples by fireplaces. And I'd think, that could have been me. That should have been me. If I'd said yes in that kitchen in 1974, I could be one of those people. I could be the grandfather in the armchair with a child on my knee and wrapping paper on the floor and the smell of turkey in the air and a woman beside me who knew the shape of my hands in the dark. Instead, I was sitting in a recliner with a frozen dinner on a TV tray, watching other people live the life I was too afraid to have. In 2018, I got sick. Nothing dramatic, pneumonia, the kind old people get when winter goes on too long and their lungs don't work the way they used to. I spent 4 days in the hospital, hooked up to an IV and a heart monitor, staring at the ceiling while nurses came and went. The room was shared. There was another man on the other side of the curtain, an old man named Ray, and his family came every day. His wife, his daughter, his son-in-law, 2 grandchildren who drew pictures and taped them to the wall beside his bed. I could hear them through the curtain, talking, laughing, arguing about who was going to bring the jello. The little girl, she must have been 6 or 7, kept saying, "Get better, Grandpa, we need you for the Easter egg hunt." Nobody came to my side of the curtain. The nurses were kind. They checked my vitals and adjusted my IV and asked me if I needed anything. But no one came to visit. No one brought pictures. No one said, "Get better, Walter. We need you." The doctor was a young woman, maybe 35, with dark hair and tired eyes. And she asked me, during one of her visits, "Is there someone we should call? Family? A friend?" I said no. She paused, just for a second. I could see her processing that. An old man, 72 years old, sick in a hospital bed, and there's no one to call. Not one person on the planet who needs to know he's in the hospital. She wrote something on her clipboard and moved on, and I lay there listening to Ray's granddaughter singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" on the other side of the curtain, and I thought about all the people I had let go over the years, one by one, like releasing balloons into the sky and watching them float away until there was nothing left in my hands. When I got out of the hospital, I came home to a house that had been empty for 4 days, and it looked exactly the same as when I'd left it. Nothing had moved, nothing had changed. No one had come by to check on me or water the plants or bring in the mail. The mail was piled up on the porch, junk mostly, catalogs and credit card offers addressed to Walter Greer or current resident. And I carried it inside and dropped it on the kitchen table and stood there in my coat, looking around the house, and I thought, if I had died in that hospital, how long would it have taken for someone to notice? A week? A month? Would they have found me eventually? The mailman maybe, wondering about the pile on the porch. The neighbor who waves but never knocks. Would someone have called the police? And would the police have broken down the door? And would they have found an empty house with a radio on the counter and a coffee cup in the sink and a life that nobody was waiting for? There's a term for it, I learned later. Discovered deceased. That's what they write in the report when they find someone who's been dead for days or weeks with no one to notice. It's a clinical phrase, cold and efficient, and it haunts me because I know with absolute certainty, that's how I will be found. Discovered deceased. Walter Greer, 79. Discovered deceased in his home on Belmont Avenue. Estimated time of death, unknown. Next of kin, none. That was the moment, not a dramatic moment, not a movie moment. Just me, standing in my kitchen in a hospital gown under my winter coat, holding a stack of junk mail, realizing with absolute clarity that I was going to die alone and that it was entirely my fault. I sat down at the kitchen table, in the chair for once, not standing at the counter, and I looked at the empty chair across from me, and I said, out loud, to no one, "What have I done?" The silence answered. After that, I started looking for Margaret, not in any organized way. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't going to hire someone, but in the small, fumbling way that old people look for things they've lost. I searched her name on the internet, the computer at the library, because I didn't have one at home back then, and I found fragments. A Thomas Ashby in Centerville, listed in the white pages. A Margaret Ashby mentioned in a PTA newsletter from 2004. A photo in the Dayton Daily News archives from 1998, some charity event. And there she was in the background, older now, her hair shorter and lighter, standing next to a tall man with glasses, who must have been Thomas, and she was smiling, and the smile was the same smile, the one that started in her eyes and worked its way down. I looked at that photo for a long time. I zoomed in. I studied her face the way a cartographer studies a map, looking for features I recognized, landmarks from a country I used to live in. She was 51 in that picture. She looked content. She looked like someone who had built the life she'd wanted, the life she'd asked me for in that kitchen on Xenia Avenue, and built it with someone else. I was happy for her. I need you to know that. I was genuinely, truly happy for her. And I was destroyed. In 2020, I heard that Thomas had died. A heart attack, sudden, at 67. Dave Morrison's wife mentioned it to me in a Christmas card, one of those long, chatty cards that people send with their holiday newsletters. And there it was, in the 3rd paragraph, between an update about their grandson's soccer team and a note about their new kitchen renovation. Sad news. Thomas Ashby passed away in September. You might remember Margaret, his wife. Such a lovely woman. She's holding up. She's holding up. I read that line over and over. Margaret was a widow now, 68 years old. Alone, maybe, for the first time in decades. And there I was, 73, alone for the 46th consecutive year, sitting in my kitchen with a Christmas card and a cup of cold coffee, and the sudden, irrational, desperate thought. I should call her. I didn't call her, because what would I say? Hi, Margaret, it's Walter. Remember me? The man who couldn't say yes, the man who let you walk away because he was too afraid to stay. I'm calling because I heard your husband died, and I thought maybe, 46 years later, you might want to try again with the man who broke your heart. No, I couldn't call her. There are things you can't undo, and there are distances you can't cross, and the space between who I was at 27 and who I am at 73 is too wide and too deep and too full of years that happened without her in them. But I thought about it. God, I thought about it. I thought about it every night for months. I'd lie in bed and rehearse the conversation. Hi, Margaret. It's been a long time. And imagine her voice. Deeper now, probably with age. And imagine what she'd say. Would she be angry, relieved, indifferent? Would she even remember me? Maybe I was nothing to her now. Maybe I was just a footnote in a life that had been full of better things. Maybe she'd moved on so completely that my name was just a name. No different from any other name from the early 70s, a leftover from a time she'd outgrown. Or maybe she hadn't. Maybe she still thought about that kitchen. Maybe she still wondered what would have happened if I'd said yes. Maybe there was a part of her, buried deep, that still heard my name and felt something. Not love, not anymore, but something, an echo, a shadow of the thing. I'll never know, because I never called. Last year in the spring, I was at the pharmacy, picking up my prescriptions, and I saw a woman across the parking lot who looked like Margaret. Same height, same walk, same way of holding her purse close to her body, like she was protecting something inside it. My heart jumped, actually jumped, like it used to when I was 26, and saw her across a room. And I took a step toward her, and then she turned, and it wasn't Margaret. It was a stranger, a woman I'd never seen before, who looked nothing like Margaret except in the ways I'd been desperate to see. I stood in that parking lot and felt something crack inside me, not break. Crack. Like a dam with a fracture letting a thin stream of water through. And the water was grief, real grief, the kind I'd been holding back for decades, keeping it contained behind walls of work and routine and the lie I told myself every morning. I'm fine. I'm getting by. I wasn't fine. I wasn't getting by. I was drowning in a house full of rooms that should have been full of people, and the only sound was the clock and the radio and my own voice talking to no one. I went home and sat in the chair at the kitchen table, the one facing the empty chair, and I pulled out the photograph from my wallet. The one from the 4th of July, 1973. Margaret laughing. Me, happy. Two people who didn't know yet that one of them was going to ruin everything. I held that photograph in my hands and I said, "I'm sorry, Margaret. I'm so sorry." The house was quiet. The clock ticked. The light moved across the floor, the way it always does, the way it always will, whether I'm here to watch it or not. Part 5. The lesson. I'm telling you this because I think you need to hear it. Not from a book, not from a movie, not from some motivational speaker on a stage with a microphone and a PowerPoint presentation about living your best life. From me. From a 79-year-old man sitting in a kitchen in Dayton, Ohio, who made the biggest mistake of his life when he was 27 years old, and has spent every day since then paying for it in the quietest, cruelest way possible, with silence. I was afraid of commitment. That's the truth of it, stripped down to the bone. I was afraid that if I let someone all the way in, if I gave someone the power to stay, they would also have the power to hurt me, to disappoint me, to turn me into the man my father was, silent, trapped, drinking in the basement while life went on upstairs without him. I thought that by keeping my distance, I was keeping myself safe. I thought that by never fully committing, I was preserving some essential part of myself, my freedom, my independence, my ability to walk away whenever the walls started closing in. But here's what I learned, and I learned it too late, the way all the important lessons seemed to come too late. The thing I was protecting myself from was the thing I needed most. Love isn't a trap. Commitment isn't a cage. They're the opposite. They're the only things that make the cage of your own loneliness bearable. They're the door you walk through to get to the other side of yourself. The side where someone knows your name and says it like it means something. The side where the empty chair has a person in it, and the house has noise, and the mornings have a reason to exist beyond the mechanical repetition of routine. I spent my whole life running from the thing that would have saved me. And now I'm standing in the wreckage, looking back at the road I took, and I can see, with the terrible clarity that only comes when it's too late to change course, exactly where I went wrong. I went wrong at that table. I went wrong when I said, "I don't know," instead of "yes." I went wrong every time I chose the familiar comfort of my own isolation over the terrifying, beautiful, uncertain mess of loving someone. I went wrong because I thought being safe was the same as being happy. It isn't. Being safe is just being numb with a nicer name. If you're young, if you're 25, 30, 35, sitting somewhere right now with someone who loves you, someone who's asking you, maybe not in words, but in the way they look at you across a dinner table or reach for your hand in a dark movie theater or leave a toothbrush at your apartment. Are you all the way in? I'm begging you, please. Be all the way in. I know it's scary. I know it feels like jumping off a cliff with no way to know if there's water at the bottom. I know there's a voice in your head. Maybe it sounds like your father or your mother or some bad experience you had when you were 17 that says, "Don't do it. Don't let them in. It's safer alone. You'll get hurt. You'll lose yourself. You'll end up trapped." I heard that voice too. I listened to it for 50 years. And it was wrong. It was the most wrong thing I've ever believed. And I've believed a lot of wrong things. Being alone isn't safe. Being alone is just a slower way of losing everything. You lose it gradually, so gradually that you don't notice until you look up and you're 79 and the house is empty and the phone doesn't ring. And the only person who says your name is the woman who cuts your hair every other Saturday. I think about the life I could have had. I think about it every day, not in some dramatic, cinematic way, not with soaring music and flashbacks and a narrator explaining what it all meant, just in the small, quiet, ordinary way that old men think about things when they're sitting alone in a kitchen at the end of another day that looked exactly like the last one. I think about mornings. That's what I think about most. I think about what it would have been like to wake up next to someone and say, "Good morning," and hear them say it back. Not a grand gesture, not a declaration, just those two words, "Good morning," said by someone who was there when you fell asleep and still there when you woke up. I think I would have given my whole career for that. My office on the 6th floor, my name on the letterhead, my leather chair and my plaque, and my 36 years of dedicated service. I would have traded all of it for one ordinary morning with Margaret, lying in bed with the sun coming through the curtains, listening to her breathe. I think about children. Children I never had, who would have grown up and become people with their own lives and their own problems and their own children. I try to imagine them sometimes. A daughter, maybe, with Margaret's brown eyes and my stubborn chin. A son who threw a baseball in the backyard, while I pretended to know how to catch. I imagine them at the dinner table, arguing about homework, complaining about school, rolling their eyes at my jokes. I imagine teaching them to drive, walking them to their first day of school, standing in the audience at their graduation, clapping until my hands hurt, thinking, "I made that, we made that, together." I'll never have those memories. I have the space where those memories should be, and the space is empty, and the emptiness has a weight to it that I carry around like a stone in my chest. I think about Thanksgiving with a full table, Christmas with wrapping paper on the floor, Sunday mornings with the newspaper spread out between us, and coffee going cold because we were too busy talking to drink it. I think about the million small, unremarkable moments that make up a shared life. The arguments about whose turn it is to take out the trash, the Saturday errands, the Tuesday night television, the sound of someone else in the house, moving through the rooms, existing alongside you in the ordinary, beautiful miracle of daily life. I think about fights even. Married people fight, I know that. They argue about money and chores and in-laws and all the small, exhausting things that come with sharing a life. And I think I would have given anything for those fights, for the messiness, for the inconvenience, for the beautiful, painful, extraordinary difficulty of loving someone enough to stay, even when staying is hard, even when you want to walk out the door. Even when the walls are closing in and the voice in your head is screaming, run. Staying. That's the whole thing. That's all love is. The decision to stay. I want to tell you something that I wish someone had told me when I was young, when I was sitting in that diner on Brown Street with a cup of coffee I didn't want, watching the sunlight hit the face of a girl with brown eyes and a blue blouse with white flowers on it. I wish someone, my mother, my father, a stranger, anyone, had taken me by the shoulders and shaken me and said, Walter, listen to me. The fear never goes away. You don't wait for the fear to go away and then commit. You commit while you're afraid. That's what courage is. That's what love is. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to stay anyway. The decision to say yes when every part of you wants to say, I don't know. I didn't know that. I thought courage meant being unafraid. I thought love meant being certain. I waited for a feeling of certainty that never came, and while I was waiting, the years went by, and Margaret married someone else, and my mother died with a photograph in her drawer, and the house filled up with silence, and I became the thing I was most afraid of. A man alone in a room with nothing to show for his life, but the things he didn't do. There's a bench in the park near my house. I go there most afternoons when the weather is good. I sit and I watch the people, the families, the couples, the children. And sometimes, when the light is right and the wind is soft and someone is laughing somewhere nearby, I close my eyes and I pretend. I pretend Margaret is sitting beside me. I pretend we're old together. Really old. The kind of old where you've seen everything and done everything, and the only thing left is to sit on a bench in the afternoon sun and be grateful that you're sitting there with the person you chose 50 years ago. I pretend she's holding my hand. I pretend our grandchildren are playing by the pond. I pretend we're going to go home together after this and make dinner and sit at the table and talk about nothing and everything and fall asleep on the couch watching a movie we've seen 100 times. I pretend, and then I open my eyes and the bench is empty and I'm alone, and the pretending is over. If I could go back, if someone gave me one more afternoon, I would sit in that kitchen on Zania Avenue, and I would put my spoon down, and I would look at Margaret across that wobbly table with its cardboard-propped leg, and I would say, I'm terrified. I don't know how to do this. I'm afraid I'll turn into my father. I'm afraid I'll hurt you. I'm afraid of everything, but I want this. I want you. I want all of it. The mornings and the fights and the kids and the mess and the growing old and all of it, every single bit of it. And I'd rather be afraid with you than safe without you. That's what I would say. Those are the words. They were always the words. I just couldn't find them in time. It's evening now. The light has left the kitchen. The radio is playing something slow. An old song, something from the 70s. Something Margaret might have known. The coffee is cold in my cup. The clock ticks. The house is quiet. I'll go to bed soon. I'll lie there in the dark and listen to the nothing and think about the everything, and tomorrow I'll wake up and watch the light come through the window and start the day again. The same day. The day of a man who had the chance to be loved and let it go because he was afraid of what it might cost him. I know the cost now. I've been paying it for 50 years. If you're reading this, if you're sitting somewhere with a heart full of fear and a person full of love waiting for you to decide, don't wait. Don't be like me. Don't spend your life looking back at the door you could have walked through. The fear is real, but the loneliness is worse. I promise you, the loneliness is so much worse. Tomorrow morning the light will come through the window again. It will hit the counter at 7:15. It will move across the linoleum, slow and golden, and it will reach the edge of the table by 8. I will sit here in this chair with my coffee, and I will watch it. And across from me, the other chair will be empty, the way it's been empty for 50 years, the way it will be empty tomorrow, and the day after that, and all the days after that, until there are no more days. That is the cost of being afraid. I wish I had been brave.